Hi, folks. As Rich mentioned, I'm Bob Coates. I'm with the Office of State Budget and Management. Dr. Mike Klein and I are the demographic side of the Demographic and Economic Analysis Unit. I also serve as the Governor's Census Liaison. So that's why I'm here to talk a little bit about the Boundary Annexation Survey. Anyone here familiar with BAS? Good, glad to see the hands. All right, so let's talk about BAS and the process that Rich finished up on, hinting at this municipal boundaries tool and the future of how we record annexations and how those get to the Census Bureau. So we had a great, although unfortunate, example of the importance of good, reliable census data at small levels with Hurricane Helene assessment, damage assessment, and recovery. Being able to get good information at small geographic levels about the nature of our communities is important in emergency situations. And y'all are the linchpins of providing that local information. BAS is a part of it. BAS happens every year. And there are other operations that will allow you to verify information within your corporate boundaries, but all of that is built upon making sure that the Census Bureau has the right corporate boundaries for your area. And that's what BAS does. BAS is an annual survey. The questionnaires usually go out in the end of December, first part of January. Letters are mailed to the highest elected officials of every jurisdiction, counties, municipalities, state, and tribal areas. You are asked to report any boundaries that were legally in place as of January 1st. So the BAS deadline or the BAS reference point is January 1st. If you get those responses in by March 1st, then those boundaries that you've reported will show up in data releases happening later that year, produced by the Census Bureau. So your American Community Survey estimates that come out in September and December, if you get your reports in, your BAS responses in by March 1st, those boundaries will show up in your ACS data later that year. Rich's office and Nathan are the folks who are the certifying entities for the state of North Carolina. So that was part of the hoop that you heard in Rich's presentation. If you had a boundary change, but you didn't report it to the Secretary of State's office, you may have reported it to BAS, but the Secretary of State's office can't certify that if you didn't notify them. So as changes happen, as there's turnover locally, somebody just may have forgotten or didn't notify the Secretary of State's office, and it comes back to impact your census data. So that's been a challenge. We also want to point out that, as I mentioned, BAS is tracking your boundary changes as of January 1st, but there are plenty of opportunities, plenty of stakeholders that have different timelines. And the state demographer's timeline is July 1. So the BAS data is helpful for the state demographer's purposes, but it's not exactly what they need. So a lot of agencies, a lot of stakeholders are asking you for the same information in different ways at different times. So we're wrapping up BAS now. If you haven't responded to BAS by March 1st, you can still respond through May 1st. If you respond by May 1st, those boundaries won't show up in this year's material, but they will be included in next year's BAS. So you can still respond if you haven't. A couple of different ways you can respond to BAS. If you're a seasoned veteran like myself, way back in the day, you used to get big paper maps that were 3 foot by 3 foot, and you got a green pencil and you got a red pencil, and you marked lines on the map. That was fine 20, 30 years ago. Not the most spatially accurate way of getting things done. So in the digital age, there are many more ways, many more accurate ways of doing those boundary updates. The Census Bureau creates a geographic update partnership software called GUPS. That's the second item up there. It's based on a QGIS platform, and it's free. So you can download GUPS and do your BAS, or you can use the partnership toolbox, attach that toolbox, install it on your ArcGIS, and you can do BAS that way. So there are a number of different ways. A paper option is still there. A number of different ways you can do your response to BAS. And I have included a link to the BAS homepage if you want more information, more details, or download some of these materials for your own purposes. So as I mentioned, the BAS information is really important, but it does lead to repeated demands on y'all at the local level. You're the local experts on your boundaries, so that's why the Census Bureau asks you for that information. But that's also why the state demographer asks you for that information. It's why transportation asks you for that information, the Department of Revenue, all these other folks. So you're getting hit a lot asking for the same information. It's not the most efficient use of your time. The Geographic Information Coordinating Council, the GIC, who are huge sponsors of this conference, started looking at ways that there may be a better solution for this. There may be a way that we can close the loophole so the Secretary of State's office is actually getting information on all the boundaries. There may be a way that we can get information to the Census Bureau that's more efficient. There may be a way that we can lighten the lift on y'all so you can just maintain your information as you would on any normal business day and not have to worry about submitting it to multiple sources. So toward that end, we have the Municipal Boundaries tool. I'm going to shift gears and talk about that now. You have the link here. It's available through the Projects tab on the NC1 Map homepage. So if you know NC1 Map, just go there, look at projects, pull down, you'll see Municipal Boundaries. So Colleen is sick, but she had this visualization. I thought it was a good one, so I stole it. You've got these two pictures. They look a lot alike. It's kind of like looking at your local boundaries. So the top picture is your Bass boundary. That's what your boundaries look like on January 1st. The bottom picture is the boundary that the state demographer needs for July 1st. They look pretty similar, but one bat is now upside down and one witch has turned around going the other way. Instead of y'all having to be peppered all the time with, well, what does your boundary look like now? We were looking for a way that you could just report your boundaries as they change and they had a date stamp on them to meet whatever the need was. So whether you have a project that's based on January 1, July 1, May 1, whatever the need may be, they don't have to come back and pepper you. They can just look at a field on a common resource. So to meet all this duplication needs and the need for an authoritative resource, a working group for municipal boundaries was formed. So the number one item there is we want a resource we can all use. We want to make sure that a yardstick is a yardstick. It's 36 inches, it's 3 feet, and everybody can rely on the authority of that one resource. We want to reduce the reporting burden on local governments. Y'all have enough to do and not enough resources as it is. So where can we find efficiencies for y'all? We wanted a clear and simple tool that everyone can look at. It doesn't call for you to go to classes and get another degree just to learn how to use one new tool. And we want to make sure that your authority is underscored at all times. The state is not saying this is what your boundary is going to be. The state is simply saying this is what you've told us your boundary is. So at all times, your boundary is your business. This is just a way for reporting your information. So to start off with, a working group was formed in the GICC. We started off with the broadest scope we could find for grabbing stakeholders. This is a small subset of what some of those stakeholders look like. We're going to be talking about the tool and how to use it now, but I don't think this is ever going to be a project that's done. So if you have better ideas or there's suggestions on making this process and this tool better, we want to hear about it. But this is where we started. So we looked at 911, we looked at Census, we looked at what the League of Municipalities, Association of County Commissioners, State Demographer, Census Bureau, what do all these folks need? And we tried to find the biggest common denominator to grab that information and say, okay, this is what we're going to collect in the Municipal Boundaries tool. The Municipal Boundaries tool doesn't collect everything. So you're not going to stop getting calls for boundary information, but what you are going to get is more targeted calls because the base information is already available. So as Rich pointed out, at the bottom you see again the link to the Municipal Boundaries site. When you get there, there are two buttons that you can click on, two main entry points, but all roads lead to Rome. So no matter which one you click on, you can do everything once you get into the tool. The first step is just doing the very basic. Take a look at your boundaries and say, yeah, that looks good, and provide us a contact information in case we have questions to get back with you. So with Bass, 80 of our counties in North Carolina had cooperative Bass agreements where the county was responding for all the municipalities within their jurisdiction. As we go into using this tool, we are very close now to having a statewide Bass agreement. It'll probably be in place by the end of this year, and the goal is that that tool will take care of Bass response for everyone. So you will not need to respond, knock on wood, you will not need to respond to Bass next year in 2026. Letters still have to be mailed out to the highest elected officials, but those letters will have a line in there saying, we have a statewide partnership agreement, update your boundaries through this tool, and the state will respond. There's no need for you to fill out an individual response. So that's what's coming, most likely by the end of this year. We are testing the new process. The Census Bureau has a test area in 4 counties in western North Carolina. Anyone here from Clay, Graham, Swain, or Jackson counties? or the Qualla boundary of the eastern band. Okay, that's the test area. So those folks, we're testing this process now with them. They will go through the whole 2030 census process next spring. So you're going to see a lot more activity around geographic preparations there. So step one, go into your process. Oh, I wanted to back up and say, if you did have a county partnership agreement, a cooperative agreement for Bass, when the new statewide agreement goes into place, that county partnership agreement is going to be sunsetted. So it doesn't exist anymore. You can still work individually if you want to tell your county, hey, could you just use this tool to update our boundary changes? That's fine. How you do your updates within your county is your business. We just want to make sure that it's done. So we're asking folks to make this part of your usual business cycle. Maybe once a month, once a quarter, before each council meeting, take a quick look at your boundaries and make sure those are okay. Use option one, take a look. If everything's okay, say, yeah, that's great. Looks good. Here's my contact information. If your county comes back and they have a different set of boundaries, we have two contact informations. We're going to call y'all and say, why are there differences here? Can you help us understand what the boundaries should actually be? So that's why we need the contact information. Option two is if there are changes. So we'll walk through both of these really quickly. So if you click on either one of those tabs, this is the tool that you'll go into. You'll notice at the top, there's a search window, so you can just input your jurisdiction name and it'll find it, or you can zoom into it if you'd like. On the far left-hand side, the buttons that you see, the very top one is the approval button. So if everything looks good, this is where you'll start. And you see on the right-hand side, it's pretty simple. It's the date approved. It'll default to the date that you're looking at it. You just say, here's my name, here's my title, and you sign on the bottom, and you're done. That's all you have to do. I encourage everyone to do that when you're not in a session here, maybe this weekend when you're just relaxing, thinking about boundaries. You can go in and view your boundaries and sign off on them. If you look at your boundaries and there's a problem and you can't approve them, the next two options, you'll see the buttons on the left-hand side. The second one is, we have an annexation I'd like to submit, or you have incorrect boundaries. So if there is a boundary change, you'll be prompted with these inputs. Everything that has a red asterisk next to it is required. So you do need to provide that information. You'll notice that there's an input area for survey. We strongly encourage, if you've got a boundary change, that you submit survey information as well. It's not required, but if you're doing the annexation and you're having it surveyed, you can attach that information, and it just gives us a lot more information to support your boundary changes. So, what do you need to do to review your process? Go to the link that I just showed you and look at it. However, you can also download your shape information, your boundary information, and bring it into your ArcGIS system, or your staff can. If that's easier for you, you can do that. So you've got two different ways of looking at it. Also, you can review your ETJs at the same time you're reviewing your corporate boundaries. So the image that we see from the system over there, the green area, that's the actual corporate boundaries, and the blue area outside of that is the ETJ. You can review and maintain both within the system. We encourage you to do that. So correct your boundary. If something's not right, you can submit a new boundary layer, and you're prompted to do that. You can also submit the annexations. So as we said at the very beginning, you may be from an area where we haven't had an annexation, we haven't had a boundary change in a Coons age. But remember, the old way these boundaries were maintained was paper and pencil. So just because you haven't had a change in a long time doesn't mean that your boundary is correct. So go in and take a look. If there is a change, submit what that corrected boundary should be, and we'll get back in touch with you. That gets us into the overall process. So the third part here is something that's ongoing. If you have better ideas of what would make this system better, easier to use, we want to hear it. So Rich and I are the chairs of the working group on this. Absolutely get in touch with us, or anyone else on the GICC will point you in the right direction. So here's what happens with the overall process. If you submit your approval, you say, hey, everything looks great, we'll update the status, and you're done. So if you click on your jurisdiction, you'll get a pop-up like this. It'll show you when the last approval was and the status of your jurisdiction right now. So if it's been a year, longer, if it's been a month or so, you can go in and say, yeah, things continue to look good. That lets us know, yeah, things look good for y'all, but it also updates our contact information. So if there's turnover in your office, let us know who the contact person should be. You do it on the approval form. But what about if you've got a change to report? So number one, when we start off with the light blue, that's all your authority. You submit the information. We replace the existing boundary with the updated information, and it comes back to you. It doesn't go live, it doesn't become a resource within the authoritative boundary layer until you say, yes, that is correct. So again, the authority is with all the local folks. Once you say it's okay, we update the status to approved, and you're done. If you submit an annexation, it's a little bit more involved because we're updating the polygons within the annexation layer. We're updating all the documents that are required that Rich mentioned. We're appending the municipal boundary layer. We're coming back to you after we've done all of that saying, does this look right? And if you say yes, at that point, does it go live on the system? So all the authority is right with y'all through the whole process. So this says pilot period at the top. We're kind of beyond that. As I mentioned, we're hoping to go live with this for the Census Bureau with BAS by the end of this year. But in the meantime, absolutely take a look at your boundaries on the system that we just showed you. Start submitting your annexations digitally. Get in a regular business model of reviewing your boundaries on just whatever the regular basis is. If you want to do it first of every month, great. Once a quarter before each council meeting, whenever, but just make sure it's a regular part of your business operation. Communicate internally about what's working, what's not working. Hey, this is the new way. If we have a boundary change, make sure that we're updating it here, and let us know how we can improve things. Until you hear otherwise, Dr. Klein and the state demographer's annual survey, that's going to continue to come your way. Don't stop responding to surveys until you hear, hey, we're going to be relying on this new source. So even after next year, if the Census Bureau says, yes, we have a statewide agreement, we're going to work with this. If the state demographer of transportation, if they haven't made that shift yet, keep responding to our other partners until they tell you not to. And don't go in and approve your boundary once and then just forget about it. Make sure it's something that you revisit on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we're current with y'all. So we've talked a bit about this, but what's the future of BAS now? So we've got the statewide BAS response nearly complete to start in 2026. We've already done the test this year. We're in the process of doing the test this year. I mentioned letters are still going to go out. That's going to happen unless the Census Bureau changes its way of doing things. They always have to contact the highest electeds, but there will be text there saying, you don't have to respond to this. We have a statewide agreement. Remember, your county agreements will no longer be valid when this change happens. So you'll need to work a little bit. If you want to keep having your county respond for your municipality, you need to work that agreement out yourselves. Otherwise, you can certainly you can do it yourself. It's just however you want to respond, do it in a way that works best for you. Okay. If you have questions, you've got my email address there. You've got Rich's. Colleen Kiley is the glue that keeps everything together. Unfortunately, she's sick, so she's not here today. But any one of these 3 email addresses, send your information to us. We'll be happy to answer them as soon as possible. And there's my direct information with my office phone number. So that's the end of my presentation. We're going to have the panel come up now. We'll field some questions in. I think we also have a Menti session that Luke is going to kick off for us. So, Luca, what do I need to do to get you set?
Done.
Okay.
And turns out Luca said, I'm actually on the panel, and I just didn't realize.
He is on the panel. Hey, everyone. My name's Luca Venegoni. I'm filling in for Colleen today. She's the GIS program manager for CGIA, and I am actually directly working with updating a lot of these boundaries in the authoritative resource. So if you have submitted that survey recently, chances are that I was the one updating that data set. So as we transition into the panel real quick, I just want to get a feel for, if everybody could scan that QR code real quick. We're just trying to get a feel here for how this group engages with the municipal boundaries data set, and just kind of try to get a feel for what your needs are. So if you want to scan that QR code, that'll take you to something called a Menti, which is going to show live updates for the respondents in this room on a graph. And you can also just join with this code if you find yourself on the menti.com page. pretty involved group here. All right, as you guys finish those up, I'm just going to go ahead and start with asking a few questions to the panel. So first of all, could everybody introduce themselves real quick? And also mention how you use municipal boundary data. Are any of them working? Interesting. Well, you guys could also come up here and speak into this mic, which is definitely working. Nathan, you can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathan Bland. I work at the Secretary of State's Office, Division of Land Management with Rich Elkins, and we are the inventory that holds on to the annexations for North Carolina. And, you can send each of your annexations to us independently of the pilot tool at current, but then, also remember to check the pilot tool. I work through the ordinances and annexations. What I like to think about the tool overall is I go back to, my daughter Charlie. I teach her math. She's in in third grade, and as she learns math, she thinks about her ability to work problems backwards. So if we apply that back to more of a opportunity to look at the data from the municipal level, if you're looking at your current ordinances and working backwards, you can look back at your annexations through the history of your jurisdiction and think about how each ordinance creates that polygon boundary of your municipality since the inception of your charter. So our office is really just keeping track of each of these ordinances and the maps that go with the ordinance, and then we're the register of deeds for basically the state of North Carolina that houses that inventory. But for the GIS side of the equation, we want to be able to push that into a geospatial file, and the boundary tool is the way to do that. So, just as we've been talking about this week with Hurricane Helene and disasters across the state, we're building up the base data with this application, and that base data is going to be what, responders are going to look at when they need to know, where the perimeters of the current jurisdictional boundaries are for each of your localities that you work for.
You've already met me, but I'm going to advance it to the next slide in the Menti so you can be answering what word best describes the boundary and annexation survey? One word, so it's going to be like a word cloud type exercise.
So I'm Mike Klein. I'm the state demographer, and I use municipal boundary that's important for local communities to know, and why we use July 1st and not January 1st like the Census Bureau is that in statute, if you get funding through the PAL bill fund, statute uses current boundaries as is July 1st of the current fiscal year. So even though I'm estimating the population of the previous year, I'm estimating it for the current municipal boundaries of the current fiscal year. So it's very important that you update your annexations, and that's how I use this tool.
Mike's work now.
So I'm not supposed to come up. Excuse me. I'm Alice Wilson. I'm with the city of New Bern. So how we use municipal boundaries, there's a lot. We could stand up here all day. But probably most importantly, we have utilities that have rates inside and outside the city. We also, for emergency response, we want to make sure we send the right personnel to the right location. Census information, how we get funds in, the PAL bill. So there's lots of resources that we want to make sure that we have the right boundaries. New Bern's kind of maybe unique, I don't know, but we have a lot of little towns around us that have a New Bern mailing address, so they get mail from, it'll say the city of New Bern, even though they're not really in the city of New Bern. So it's really important that we can identify which city a person actually lives in.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dana Kluge, and I'm the Senior Planner with the City of Greensboro Planning Department. I am in our Long Range and Strategic Planning Division, and I focus on data and demographics. One of the ways that I use the municipal boundary data is when we're conducting comparison analysis. So one of the big pushes in planning right now is for infill development or missing middle housing. So I would say that using municipal boundaries allows me to do comparisons for the city of Greensboro compared to peer cities across the state to see how our density stacks up. Also, we use it for analysis when we're doing any kind of analysis on taxable acreage and the per value that we have, and comparing that to other cities across the state is helpful. So.
And I guess we'll go, everybody already, Bob was already introduced, so we'll go into the next. Okay, great. Well, I'll just go ahead and ask as you're coming up. What do you see as importance of achieving statewide utilization of this tool?
Can you pass that paper over here?
Yeah. So I'll go to Bob. Did you hear that question?
I did not.
What do you see as important of getting statewide utilization of this tool?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the governor's census liaison. As we get ready, as we get closer to each decennial census, and there's a lot of dollars and cents that are on the table for every community in North Carolina for getting the census right, but there's an awful lot of work that usually is on y'all's shoulders as we get close to the census. And every time that happens, we understand the importance, but we don't have the people, we don't have the resources, we don't have the funds to do this job as thoroughly as we'd like. So that puts our communities at risk. So using a statewide resource, developing things that make your lives hopefully easier, more transparent, gets better data to the Census Bureau, better data back for our communities, and better funding. So the idea here is we're just trying to make the system, with all the flaws that we have to work with the Census Bureau, to make it work as efficiently, as effectively, and as beneficially for North Carolina as possible. So I did want to stress in my comments that, yeah, this is a statewide BAS response. We hope it makes your life easier, but it really is based on your authority locally. So make sure that you're letting us know what your changes are and what your boundaries look like.
Bob just stole my thunder. I think he looked at my notes, but so I would say one of the most important things about using this tool would be that the submittals that we make to state and federal agencies directly tie to dollars in our revenue. It's really important that we're submitting the BAS so that the census has the correct boundaries so that they can get the correct count of people who we are then receiving funding for. Even if it's not the decennial census, with our grant applications, we'll use numbers from the American Community Survey. So it's very important in that aspect. Also, Dr. Klein mentioned PAL bill monies come from our state demographer's report in the summer. So I would directly tie it to funding, but also just having consistency across the state is going to be really key. I know a lot of small towns rely on strained resources or have limited staff. So I think any move that we can make towards consistency is going to be key.
Yeah, and I think that just having an authoritative set of data on municipal boundaries, which is, I think a lot of people, people in this room know this is the case, but people out there in the world assume that we have a statewide municipal boundary or boundary of anything, but we know there's always problems in any sort of data set. But I think this kind of gets us towards that ideal world where we actually have, at any point in time, an official municipal boundary or a layer that we can point to and say, here's the official boundaries or the standard boundaries for all municipalities in the country or in the state. For me, again, looking at different time frames, it's important for me to have the most up-to-date information from you so that I can estimate the population for your community and for your county.
I was just going to kind of comment that we've been pushing this new pilot effort since at least the last GIS conference 2 years ago. And when we're going out and talking to people about this, I'd figure that one of the big things that they would be excited about is not getting the requests from emergency services and every other department that's maintaining a separate municipal boundaries layer and going to the municipalities or counties trying to collect all the updates. And so they're getting all these duplicate requests, and that doesn't seem to be the thing that gets people excited. What's been getting people excited is, I don't have to do the BAS anymore? That's the thing that I've seen the most positive response. So with the Menti on the second thing, I was kind of surprised we didn't have more negative things of how people described. I mean, there was a frustrating, I think. Yeah, there was a frustrating, but it wasn't nearly as big as important or necessary. So I'm actually very surprised not to see more, things like pain or make it stop or something like that.
Or no cuss words?
Yeah, or on this on this word cloud.
So I guess it's already been mentioned several times that I think having one authoritative data set that, excuse me, I'm about to lose my voice, which is probably a good thing, but just having something that you can point to and everybody statewide knows that this is the authoritative boundaries of a municipality. I know, like when I was in Durham, I used to do annexation qualifications in Durham, and we could go out and annex areas. You can't do that anymore. So you can have, like New Bern has areas where you have a property owner is in the city and the adjacent property owner is not, and then you have an adjacent property owner again that's in the city. So it can be very confusing for public works, trash people, whoever needs to service a location that they're going, am I supposed to service this location or not? So having one good defined municipal boundary is very important.
And I think it's important to know that the municipal boundary layer is not something that lives in a bubble. So this is going to be working with other resources statewide, like the address point, the E911 site. So knowing if an address is inside or outside of city limit, it's going to impact services. It's going to impact the reversion of state sales tax dollars and all those things. Speaking from the census side of things, there is the local update of census addresses program that is still going to happen leading into 2030. For local governments, you will only be able to see the addresses the Census Bureau has for your area inside your boundaries, and your boundaries are going to be reported through this resource. So just to kind of highlight that, this is something that cuts across a lot of different layers and has impacts in a number of different areas. So we encourage you, like I said, to make it a part of your business processes. Just keep reviewing it, make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. As y'all are submitting your ordinances, do keep up with the actual independent ordinances when you also update your overall municipal boundary. Because, the land records background of that is like every time you have an ordinance with a map and you send it to our office, we're keeping track of each independent one for each municipality, but it is up to, your jurisdiction to go back and audit your own ordinances and, figure out how that came to be. Just like originally I was talking about working that math problem backwards. Being able to, tell the story along the chain of how that municipality grew is of great importance with that timeline. And that shows for us when we receive the effective date and the adopted date, the people are going to come back to your jurisdiction and ask, well, why do I have to pay my tax based on, this year's January 1st data? And you can point back to that ordinance and say, this was when it became effective, and that's why it's included in this year's tax data.
Thank you, everyone. So we got about 5 minutes left on the panel, and I just want to ask one more question and then, huh? Oh, we go until 5? Including questions. Ah, okay. So we got some time then. Well, then I'll go ahead and ask all the questions that I had ready. The next one is going to be, how will this application improve your efficiency, and will you need to change your workflows? This is for both state partners and local governments. So we can go in the reverse order this time if Nathan wants to start.
So once y'all submit to the tool, and we have a lot of people using the tool, and we have the authoritative boundary being actually used, then our office at the Secretary of State can be just like the utilities companies, the fire companies, all the BAS locations. We're just another entity that will go to that tool, update our data for our office, and then we'll still reach out to y'all and say thank you, but we won't have to ask you all the time, hey, what ordinances independently did you guys annex? Because the general statute at that 160A from that chapter in the statute says it's your job as a jurisdiction to report those annexations to us. But instead, we can go to this new pilot tool on NC1 map, retrieve that data, and you really not have to bother y'all, monthly.
I think efficiently thinking about that way, I agree with Rich. I'm surprised there's not a lot more negative words on doing the BAS. It's not my favorite thing to do. When I thought of the one word, it was no. But it is very time consuming. But I think, again, going back to having one location where you can have good boundaries. I know this theme, a lot of discussion in this conference has been about emergency management and how using GIS for emergency management. You don't think, is everybody got current city limits? Does the county have the right current city limits? Does the state have my right current city limits? Does everybody have my right current city limits? We've got a storm that's getting ready to hit. I just want to make sure that's correct. I don't have to think about that if I have one good authoritative set of data that I'm maintaining that I know everybody has access to and can use. Again, that's just saves so much time and worry that you have to worry about.
I think with regards to the workflow, the biggest challenge is going to be you need to look at how these two different things that we're getting through this tool are currently submitted. Currently, these ordinances and maps are being recorded at the Register of Deeds and at the Secretary of State by typically a town clerk. Once that ordinance is passed, they sign off on it, everything's done, and it's filed. Whether or not the people in the GIS office who are going to be updating those boundaries, whether they actually even know anything about the ordinance or somebody just says, hey, here's the annexation map, it got annexed, put it in. That's the person who's going to be needing to create that geospatial data, that polygon of what is actually being annexed by this ordinance. So you've got one person submitting this currently and another person who's creating the other data. The town clerk is not going to typically have the GIS data, and if you gave it to them, would they even know what that file extension meant? If the GIS person doesn't have the ordinance and the map, and the town clerk doesn't have the GIS data, there's a disconnect there. So one of the things, and every jurisdiction is going to need to figure out what works best for them. What I've typically recommended to people is the town clerk still files those with the Register of Deeds. Town clerk lets GIS know, hey, we did an annexation. Here's the ordinance, here's the map. GIS can get those from the Register of Deeds. It's going to have the recording information already on it, which is something that we actually ask. When we get annexation ordinances and maps, we really like for them to be the one that was recorded at the Register of Deeds with that recording information so we know that it was indeed recorded. So if that clerk just lets GIS know, whether it's a county GIS or if it's the town GIS, lets them know, hey, there was an annexation, GIS does it, they can pull those documents from the Register of Deeds and submit them at the same time they're submitting the geospatial data. That's how it's going to probably work best, in my opinion. How it works best for you is going to really depend on your individual situation. But just something to consider when you're looking at implementing this.
Can I add one last thing? Sorry, my brain is about dead. we have a lot of communities across the state of North Carolina. There are smaller organizations that are understaffed and wear a lot of hats. And, having a resource that they can go to one location, and as mentioned earlier, that they don't have to be bothered replying to all these requests for boundary information. They can just point to this one resource. It just takes a load off of these smaller communities that are doing 10 people's jobs. So I think that's really important as well.
So I think in the long run, it'll change our processes for the state demographer's office. I mean, really, and it's kind of the same with Rich, we're collecting really tabular data, or actually PDFs and the ordinance number. But that information is used within our models. The one thing that I also, that is part of my overall demographic survey that I send out to municipalities and counties every summer. That's one portion. The annexation is one portion of a couple other things we're asking for. One is building permit activity. The other is to confirm or add to our group quarters population numbers for your municipalities or counties. Those are all three important for our estimates, and also the estimates for the Census Bureau. So I actually feed some of that information to the feds for their estimates. So I think in the long run, as long as everybody's using this tool, I think this will be very useful in that we can just, in the immediate future, just download what's already in this tool. The only additional thing that we would do is just go out to the communities and say, hey, are there any housing units on these annexations that have occurred in the last 2 or 3 years? Because typically, if you annex a property or an area, there's no housing on it. Sometimes it's never going to have housing because you're just annexing a water tower or something. But a lot of times, if there is going to be development, it doesn't happen that year. It's going to happen 2 or 3, maybe 5 years from there. And so part of my survey is to ask what's happening on that annexation that was annexed 3 years ago. And so having that ordinance number, having that history that Rich was going through is helpful for my information. And I think in the long run, as we improve our geospatial data, including the building footprints and addresses, some of that I may not need to go out to communities because we'll have all that at the state level.
So the city of Greensboro processes around 25 annexations per year. We had a record high in 2022 of 37 annexations. So when we're talking about improving efficiency, I think this will be really key in the way that we have our work plans and workflow laid out. I see Sheila Curry back in the back, and she's the one that's actually going to be submitting some of the data. I don't know that she would agree with me, but I don't have to do the BAS anymore, so I'm excited. But there will be changes. And I think especially for small towns and cities, it'll be really for the betterment of their resources, their workloads, where they don't have to submit everything so many times. But I think that's going to be key across the state.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Last question. What data, this is for the state partners, what data will you need to request from local governments? Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know if this one even made it into the survey because it didn't look like anyone answered that.
I don't think it did, but I'm interested about that.
Everybody raise your hand if you've used the municipal boundary update tool yet. Okay, cool. Thank you.
So, yeah, for those folks, I'm looking at you now. Questions for you. Was it god-awful? Was it a pretty easy process? Was it confusing to you? Was it intuitive at all? How was your experience? Okay. Well, stick with us as y'all are, as you go through this. If there are ways that we can make it better, we want to hear about it. But yes, ma'am, way in the back. Well, again, use the tool, go in and at least verify that your boundaries are there. You make sure that we have a contact name. That's the very easy part. And if there are changes, please let us know. To get to Luca's question, what are we going to be asking for? And again, I'm wearing the census hat now. There are lots of stakeholders that, and Mike mentioned that his follow-up surveys are going to be asking about housing units that are inside of boundary changes. So again, surveys, you're being asked questions from state stakeholders. That's not going to go away, but the questions based around boundary changes will get more intelligent. So you're not going to be asked for the same thing again and again and again and again. You'll be asked for facets of that change. So that's what this tool is meant to get to. From the census side of things, we will be using the municipal boundaries tool to respond to BAS going forward. We talked about that in the presentation. BAS is an annual process, but there is the local update of census addresses, Luca, named after Luca. That happens once a decade. Usually it starts in years ending in 7. That's going to come. You will have a limited, tight window to verify the addresses that the Census Bureau has within your corporate boundaries. There will be a new construction program that happens at the end of Luca, right before the 2030 census, saying what new addresses have you created since Luca? And that'll be a very tight, you won't get any feedback on that. They'll just say, send us your new address list, and we'll send census questionnaires to those addresses. With the Luca operation, you will get some feedback on, you had this many changes to your addresses, we accepted this many, and we rejected this many. So there, and that's a very time-limited, somewhat, it's an expensive process if you hire a contractor to get involved with it, but that is an ask that's coming your way. There's also the Participant Statistical Areas Program, or PSAP. That is where the Census Bureau asks you to help design the statistical areas, block group boundaries, census tract boundaries within your counties. So if it's helpful for you to have if you're planning development in a given part of your county, if it's helpful to have that designated as a specific block group, you will get socioeconomic data from the American Community Survey every year for the next 10 years based on those boundaries. So you do have an opportunity to provide feedback. Those are the big geospatial operations that you have to look forward to between now and late 2029, early 2030.
I think I kind of already answered my part, but basically, just to reiterate again, so the annexation survey that I have currently that goes out in the summer in conjunction with some other questions I ask for the ordinance and the effective date, but also ask for how many housing units have been built either on the current annexation that you just made or one that might have occurred in previous years. So that's important. I think going forward, I think this tool, if everybody's using it, I think it'll actually opens up some interesting possibilities of being able to model population in those annexed areas in conjunction with some of these other data resources.
One thing that I wanted to mention that's still needs to be tweaked and implemented in the tool itself. Right now, we've been really focusing on collecting locally initiated annexations. But that's not the only way that property can be incorporated into a municipality. Also, the General Assembly can adopt annexation session laws or de-annexation. A locality cannot de-annex property from itself, but the General Assembly can do so. And increasingly in recent years has had more and more bills filed to remove property from the city limits. Or even large pieces. And in those cases, you know, it's not something that you have to file with the Secretary of State's office. We do track those bills and try to put them in our system so we know where it is. But the problem is, there's, you know, I talked about the standards where when a locality annexes property, you have to record your annexation ordinance and you have to record the map. Well, when the General Assembly does an annexation or a de-annexation, they don't have any requirements as to what they can do. So sometimes you may have a legal description, sometimes you may have a reference to a survey, sometimes you may just have 2 pages of parcel numbers, and it's just listing parcel numbers. And so we don't actually have a map to show what is part of that. So if municipalities who do get legislative annexations or de-annexations can still file that with us, and we need to have a specialized tool for this where you're letting us know, hey, there was you know about this, but here, this is a map of what actually got de-annexed, and here is the polygon of what the General Assembly has added or removed from our city limits, so that can be used to update the statewide layer. That's the one piece that's not completely in place now. You could do it. You could, if it was an annexation, you could submit it right now, but there's not really a functionality in it for a de-annexation.
One last thing I thought about is really just the communication component, to, go talk to your municipal governments and, find out if they are annexing property. Does the county know about that, and does our office know about that? So, because even at our office, we'll go years where we won't hear from municipal government, and then they'll play catch up. And it probably is easier on their government, from year to year if they have somebody that's, tracking that, even if they have town turnover. So.
Are we done with our questions and ready for the audience's questions?
Yeah, we have no more for the panel, so this is your chance to speak up.
I was about to say, Nathan and I can go out in the audience and take a mic to people. That way they can everybody can hear them. So if you
That'd be
want to take
great.
that side, I'll take this side. So if you got a question that you want answered, raise your hand, and one of us, whoever's closer, will come and bring you the mic.
Over there?
Darnell. All right.
First of all, thank y'all for presenting this information. This is very helpful. My question is going to be specific to current agreements between counties and municipalities. And this tool may alleviate or establish a statewide agreement with the Bass situation. My question would be, from a practice standpoint, and maybe others are going to have this scenario as well, where the county and the towns may decide the best practice for us would be the county to keep maintaining this type of data for us. So my question would be, to do that, the county, I'm sure, would continue to manage this data for the towns because it has implications on the county's incorporated areas as well. So the county would be maintaining their own data. The county would also submit to this tool on behalf of all of these municipalities. Would that county contact person be the best person that's going to sort of bounce back in between submittal, a review by somebody on the staff with the tool, then come back to the county person to say, is this okay? Or would you somehow try to engage the municipalities in that review process?
I think right now, it's a great question. Right now, where we are is trying to get to an operational point that works for everyone, and that's going to vary from county to county. So in your county, all your municipalities, it may be that they want to continue to go with the county providing their information, in which case you would be the contact person for your county. The local governments still have the ability to look at their boundaries 24/7 locally, and if they see something that doesn't look right, they would contact you. If they submit something through the web resource, we're going to contact the stakeholders, the town and the county, saying, we have a discrepancy, let's work it out. So whoever's been submitting the information, you're going to be included on that loop, provided you've given us the contact information.
Yeah, I'd probably say that it's probably easier to keep doing it that way, but if you have a larger municipality, and Greensboro can probably speak to that experience. You know, they may want to do this on their own behalf so that there's not a delay in the process. But definitely, people that are in a rural county and have these small towns that don't have their own GIS capabilities, they're going to need, the assistance of the county, period. They don't have staff to do this, and that's been one of the problems with BASS in the past is, the town of Speed gets a BASS suggestion, and they don't know what it is, and they don't know that whether of course they haven't had any annexations, but they don't know what to do with it and don't know necessarily who at the county would know what to do with it. So, but if you've already got the agreement in place, which most of our counties do, it seems logical to continue on with that process until somebody otherwise says they would rather do it somehow different.
The only thing I would add on that is I think if you have an agreement in place, I would make sure you have in the workflow that you reach out to the municipalities at least once a year or whatever time frame you think maybe. A lot of cities don't have annexations, so once a year is probably good. Because what I've found in the last few years, as counties and municipalities have developed agreements, I would reach out to these municipalities and they say, "Oh, the county's taking care of it for me," and my survey was a little bit different, and so there was a little bit of confusion. But so that's the only thing is I worry about is as we develop those local agreements is just to make sure there's a workflow to go back and just, hey, maybe once a year have them look at this tool and say, hey, does this look right? They probably don't have the capability in terms of the GIS experience, but I think that's just maybe just make sure that there's that point of work or the workflow in it.
Until you get it set up to do de-annexations, what do? My town had a de-annexation last year. Do I just say the boundary's wrong in the tool?
So the initial option is to just review and say approve the boundary. If you can't approve the boundary because it's incorrect, the next option is to submit an annexation. And if the annexation happened last in 2024, yeah, so I would just go ahead and submit the annexation as the second option. Or you can use the third option where you say the boundary's wrong. It's going to prompt you for a lot of the same information. So if the boundary's wrong, when did it change? And you're just submitting the same annexation information there.
Well, it's a de-annexation.
It's a de-annexation, yeah.
Yeah,
There
we
is an
had
option on the bottom. I think it was X'd out on the slide. But there is an option on there where it says de-annexation, and you're submitting the same ordinance information that de-annexes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the part we needed to fix.
Yeah.
Is that there was a specific thing that it didn't make it sound like that somebody could locally de-annex. It needed to
Right.
be separate because only the General Assembly could do that. But I think when you're looking at your boundary and whether it's correct, before you decide which way you want to go, you have to figure out why is it incorrect. Is it incorrect because it's missing some recent annexations? Then the better thing to do would be to actually submit those annexations so those various annexations are tracked separately. If it's incorrect because it's just in the wrong place or it was based on the wrong lines and you need to correct the lines as opposed to just adding annexations to it, then that's where submitting the corrected entire boundary is probably your better option. Okay. Did you still want to ask a question? Okay. Oh, over here. Oh, come in.
So I work with the municipal boundary layer when I do research, and I wanted to know, just out of curiosity, how long does it take for a municipality's power bill map to be updated in connection to the municipal boundary update tool, or are they updated simultaneously?
Now, the Powell bill maps, those are updated by the DOT currently. And there's specific folks there. I think that's one of the redundancies. What? Oh, you're talking about the Powell bill maps submitted by the towns. That I don't know what the schedule that DOT requests those is?
So
Every 2 years?
So, yeah, the PAL bill, so when cities submit that, they're using the same July 1st boundary, and then the time frame is, like, I have to produce my population estimates by September 15th, and so that's usually and that's driven by PAL bill, so by the end of September, they have to distribute those funds. So basically, that July through September is when those updates occur, because that determines the funding.
And for anybody who's not familiar with Powell bill, that's maps where the towns submit their boundaries in order to qualify for funding for maintaining the roads that are inside their municipalities.
So I'm a county staff, and so if I'm going to be submitting to the tool, do I need to have an interlocal agreement or just do it for the municipality? What gives me the authoritative right to do it?
I would say it's related to the question the gentleman had back there. So a lot of that would rely on the communication that you have with your local government. So if you've got a local community that's like, we have to send this information to the Register of Deeds in the county, and we're a small municipality, so we're happy for you to submit our information. That's local communication. We're not going to oversee that for you. If we do get a response from the county, and we also get a response from the municipality and they don't agree, we're going to come back to both of y'all saying, where's the breakdown here? So we're trying to facilitate the process, but we're not endorsing one or the other. Whatever works best for y'all.
We'd rather have more than one than everybody being afraid to step on somebody else's toes and nobody responding, and we just don't know whether what we have is correct or not.
I think what you can tell folks, if you're from the county level and you're doing a submission for all your municipalities, if you haven't gotten any response or if they don't have a change and you approve existing boundaries, it's going to be updated on the viewer. So if they look and said, well, they approved our boundaries on this date and we know that's incorrect, again, that's where we come back to quality control. That's built in on our back end. So if we hear that that's not correct and we see that it was signed off by this person on this date, we can connect the two of y'all and work it out.
Not seeing any further questions. Luca, did you have any special insights for everybody as dealing with the date, you actually being the one that's processing it?
Yeah, thanks for including me, Rich. As far as specific insights, I wanted to respond to something that Ms. Curry mentioned in the back earlier. I remember you saying it would be nice to get some communication that we have received that update, and then, maybe an email, send it back would be nice, and letting you guys know. So that should be part of the process, and we are working on that bit. So where I am at right now in terms of finishing up the updates that have been submitted, I'm preparing to wrap it up probably next week, and then reach out to all the municipalities and the counties that have submitted so far and say, hey, we've pushed the updates. If you feel like this looks good to you, please submit an approval form, and then we can go ahead and populate that field in our boundaries data set that says municipality has approved edits, and this is the date they did that on. So that is going to be implemented within the overall framework of the process going forward.
And last thing, the Secretary of State's office just got a new website, so you can always go there to the homepage, Google North Carolina Secretary of State, go to divisions, land records. From there, you'll see the boxes that Rich showed in the slides earlier from his presentation. And then simply from there, you can, do your own research, look back through your jurisdiction and, double check what's been sent to us. And until this tool is live, do continue to send all your ordinances for annexation to our office. Yes?
One quick question. For a county that might have a lot of high volume, what would be the expectation for submittals? Would you want to see maybe a couple of large submittals quarterly, or would you want to see that county being very active, like as they're getting them, and you might see them 100+ times a year updating?
I think that's maybe a Luke. I mean, personally, I think it's better to, process it as you get it, as opposed to dumping all of it all at one time. But I'll let Luca answer, because he's the one who's actually doing the back-end processing.
Sure. I mean, the goal here is for us to be updating this data set as the submissions roll in from our end. But we only really need to submit to BAS once a year. So I would say once a year to take a look at it and submit the update would be great. I mean, if you want to do it more often than that, that is even better. But at a minimum, once a year, I think should be enough.
Actually, I would say twice a year.
Twice a year? Okay. Listen to him.
Because you have January 1st reference date is for Census Bureau estimates and ACS and all that. And you have July 1st for PAL bill population estimates, which so the January 1st impacts your federal funds. Your July 1st date impacts your state funds. So you want to have all your annexations that are effective for at least as of dates of January 1st, July 1st. So that would be kind of my recommendation on at least having that. But ideally, it's as you get them, have that part of your workflow.
Yeah, I think we've kind of gone full circle on this. So as Lucas said, we don't know. I mean, you're talking to a number of stakeholders that have very specific deadlines, but there are other stakeholders that aren't sitting at this table that have different deadlines. So having something that's being updated as they take effect is going to make sure that when those folks do their harvesting of boundary information for whatever their deadlines are, October 1st, February 1st, whatever those are, we want to have something that's as current as possible. We'll start with the once a year or twice a year just to get us to a base level, but going forward, it needs to be more of a kind of an ongoing living resource.
Another consideration to that is, even though they've adopted an ordinance and annexed something effective as of that date, there's also often a delay before that actually gets recorded. And depending on the jurisdiction, it can be longer, and sometimes they just don't even think to record things. And the longer things are not reported, the more things are out of sync and not get picked up by the BAS, because they don't know it. You know, when the state does it for you, if you haven't reported it to us, we don't know to report it for you. So I'd say, especially for a large, fast-growing county like Wake, it should be a continuous process, and just each annexation as it's mapped gets submitted. Whereas now the U.S. Census Bureau, that only needs to be done when they do the BAS thing, and that's not even always every year. There's not every year that they even do BAS. Bob can speak more to that, but I think an ideal procedure would be just to add this submission to that workflow of the clerk adopting the thing, recording at the Register of Deeds, letting GIS know. GIS maps it. GIS updates their website. GIS posts it to the municipal boundaries tool. It becomes a part of the workflow with every annexation you receive. And the quicker turnaround it is, the less that the data that you have on your website doesn't match what we have on our website. Yep.
Sorry to bother you on this, but for example, you say the IT department is controlling the online website. They update the boundaries for the municipalities. But what happens if the person who submit the BAS works for the planning department, and he has or she has a consolidated agreement with the municipalities to send that information to the Census Bureau? Are you accepting those changes from the IT person who works with the online mapping, or the person who's been submitting this to the Census Bureau every year from the planning department?
So there's not a specific role or designated role within a local government or county government that we only accept submissions from. So different governments have their systems structured a little bit differently. So maybe in one county, I'll be receiving the submission from a tax assessor, or maybe in another one from a planner. So they'll put their name and they'll put their email in that submission form. And, we want to make sure that we're being thorough and that these are real submissions. And so we look through the email, and if there's anything that looks fake, we're going to obviously throw it out. Person who, could you repeat that question?
The highest elected official person who gets the notification about BAS.
And the designee, right. So the Census Bureau is required by law to contact the highest elected official with all the programs that they work on. And the highest elected usually has a designee, the person that does the work. And there can be turnover there. So there's sometimes a disconnect. So there may not always be a secondary contact that the Census Bureau mails to, but they're obligated to contact the highest elected. And as Luca mentioned, it doesn't have to be the highest elected. It's almost never the highest elected, as long as someone from that jurisdiction responds.
But ideally, the point of this whole thing is so that you don't have to respond, and the state will do it with the data that you submit through this tool, and it takes it off your plate. And we are out of time. So I'm just going to, while I have the mic, I'm gonna, on behalf of Bob and myself for the working group, want to thank everybody who served on the panel, and thank Luca for stepping in at the last minute and filling in as our moderator. And thank you all for coming and listening to us, and hope we get submissions from you through the tool soon.